It's Friday, December 29th, and this is The National.
Tonight, too cold to party. Extreme temperatures force a scale back of New Year's Eve celebrations.
Meet the hero who saved a busload of passengers after the driver passed out on Canada's busiest highway.
But we begin in the Bronx, a community in mourning after the deadliest fire New York City has seen in decades. 12 people are dead, several of them children, after that fire swept through an apartment building with incredible speed last night. Firefighters did put it out relatively quickly, thanks to a fast and massive response. It also didn't take long for investigators to announce the cause.
We found that this fire started in the kitchen on the first floor. It started from a young boy, 3.5 years old, playing with the burners on the stove.
After realizing the situation a little before 7 p.m., the mother did what any parent would. She grabbed her children and fled. But investigators say she left the door open. Fresh air rushed in. More fuel for the fire.
This fire quickly spread up the stairs. Fire travels up. The stairway acted like a chimney. It took the fire so quickly upstairs that people had very little time to react. They couldn't get back down the stairs. Those that tried, a few of them perished.
The building did have some outstanding safety violations, like faulty smoke detectors. But investigators say it was the rapid spread of the flames because of that open door that doomed so many so quickly. It's a point New York's fire commissioner really wanted to drive home today.
Also, you've seen the ads, close the door, close the door, close the door.
Those ads he's referring to are part of a fire safety awareness campaign launched by the city to help prevent precisely this kind of tragedy.
If you simply close the door, please.
Now, there are regulations in New York that apartment buildings are supposed to have self-closing doors. We don't yet know if this particular building did. But as investigators look for the answers to those kinds of questions, people are grieving. Stephen D'Souza spoke to some of them.
As the flames raced through the building, 58-year-old Maria Batiz clutched her 8-month-old granddaughter. Unable to escape, she jumped into a bathtub. That's where her brother says their bodies were found.
I'm numb. Don't know how to feel. I'm just numb.
Among the other victims identified, 37-year-old Karen Francis and her daughters, 7-year-old Sharmella and 2-year-old Kylie.
Oh my God, the 2 little babies. God rest their souls, they're beautiful.
Nana Yeffel is one of the lucky ones. He escaped with his family after his daughter warned him that there was smoke.
I managed to bring my daughters back one after the other to the fire escape. Like the ladder you saw there, that was my apartment. And then they took them one after the other to downstairs.
His brother Isaac says he can't believe the family survived.
This was a very scary situation to me because they're the only family I have here, so I was doing everything possible to make sure they were okay.
10-year-old Crisbel Martinez was rescued from the 5th floor.
And there was smoke in the living room, so we went to wake up my brother, and then he put me in the fire escape and I came down.
Caught in the middle of stories of loss and survival are those like Eunice Reed. She's still searching for her friend's son, Emmanuel Mensah.
Right now, we don't know where he is. That's the thing. We're hoping, like I said, we're hoping beyond hope that he's one of the 4 who are in critical care, because otherwise we don't know what else to do.
Later in the day, the family would discover that Mensah was among the dead. Residents here are still processing what happened inside the building and coming to terms with the cause of the deadly fire.
It's shocking. I mean, you hear all these stories, but until it happens to you.
That shock is shared across the neighborhood, where many came with donations of clothes for the survivors, trying to do whatever they can to help the recovery begin. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Now, one positive note here is that these sorts of deadly fires are a lot less common than they used to be.
8 square blocks of small houses burned like paper boxes.
New York saw its peak in 1970 when 310 people were killed in fires. Last year, the number was down to 48. Officials say that's because of faster response times, stricter fire inspections, a program to hand out smoke alarms, and more education. And now to that cold snap that's still gripping much of Canada. And Rosie, it's having an impact in the nation's capital.
It sure is, Andrew. Some of those New Year's Eve celebrations have now been canceled because of the frigid temperatures, which is awfully disappointing for those who are hoping to party on Parliament Hill.
I mean, we're Canadians. We live in cold weather. We know what it's like, and it's good to stay in the cold weather. To be Canadian.
You think we can hack it?
Yeah.
He might be able to hack it, but not everybody could. And now there won't be much to see. There'll be some fireworks, that skating rink, but no concert. Ashley Burke got some reaction today.
Preparations are still underway on Parliament Hill, but crews are now gearing up for a much smaller event. The government called off its big Canada 150 New Year's Eve concert. Ali Reza paid almost $2,000 for last-minute flights from England to Ottawa.
We've come nearly 3,000 miles, 3,500 miles, 7 hours across continent to Ottawa to see these DJs perform. Not happening. Super disappointing.
It's expected to be at least minus 25 and feel even colder with the wind chill. That has officials concerned. Canadian Heritage released a statement saying it had to cancel a number of events on the Hill, given Environment Canada's extreme cold warning and due to public health and safety concerns. That statement followed several hours of confusion about the status of the celebration. The website showed cancellations before any official word went out.
The weather we've been getting is extraordinarily cold, and some people might even say it's evil.
This DJ and his daughter were going to perform at the celebration.
I'm super sad because I won't get the chance to share the stage with my daughter and make something memorable, you know, just having something to put like in our scrapbook later on and say, you remember that time we did the closing party for Ottawa, we were on stage and there was 20,000 people just cheering and everything.
Back on the Hill, those that plan to attend learn the news.
I'm not sure how many people will want to be outside and be at a concert with this bone-chilling freezingness.
Yeah, it's disappointing, but certainly understandable.
I think it's a tragedy. I think, you know, Canadians are really tough. If they had the show, I think people would have showed up.
Even though it's been deemed too cold for an outdoor concert, the fireworks and laser show are still going ahead. And the Hardy can skate on the Canada 150 rink until midnight to ring in the new year. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, it's not just Ottawa. Toronto and Edmonton have also shortened their celebrations because of the cold. Charlottetown has entirely canceled theirs. But for the capital, this is just the latest wrinkle in the Canada 150 festivities, many of which have also been thwarted by Mother Nature.
I think it's so cold that the ice is cracking, so it's a little dangerous for the girls to be out there.
Earlier this week, an outdoor children's hockey tournament on Parliament Hill was called off because, of all reasons, the ice was too cold to play on.
I'm kind of happy it was cut short. It's really cold.
That tournament was one of the main reasons the Liberal government gave for building that controversial multi-million-dollar rink.
We spent an hour in the rain to get nowhere. Basically 3 blocks we went in an hour.
Canada's big birthday bash was plagued by chaotic lineups, made worse when stormy weather rolled in, shorting out the security checkpoints.
When are we going to merge with that line so you can get us in?
Thousands couldn't even get to Parliament Hill. All that rain made the lawn more like a mud pit. Not a problem for some. Firefighters, though, were even called to help pump out the puddles. In the spring, Canada's famed snowbirds were supposed to soar over Parliament Hill with their French counterparts, but poor weather grounded the jets.
And I will add, there's been some pretty messy weather happening here in British Columbia. The Fraser Valley getting hit pretty hard. An ice storm left tens of thousands of people without power last night. Thousands are still in the dark, and another storm is moving through tonight. The whole region is under a winter storm warning, with up to 30 centimeters more snow expected. And treacherous conditions may have been a factor in the death of a 10-year-old boy near the town of Nakusp in the Kootenays. The car he was in plunged into a lake. Well, it's been a year of almost constant provocation from North Korea that resulted in a raft of sanctions, international efforts to get the regime to halt its nuclear weapons program. But has Pyongyang found a new way to skirt those penalties using an illegal network of ships? Jacqueline Hansen takes a look.
Two large ships side by side in open water appear to be transferring oil illegally from a ship flying a Hong Kong flag to one from North Korea. It comes a day after Donald Trump tweeted about China being caught red-handed, funneling fuel to the north. But Beijing, one of North Korea's last remaining allies, denies it broke a UN resolution that bans ship-to-ship transfers.
Please raise their hand.
Publicly, China has been on board with UN sanctions that limit North Korea's access to fuel, a powerful way to hinder the country's economy and its ability to launch more rockets.
There's a lot of responsibility on China to ensure that North Korea does not acquire any more resources that could lead to weaponization or nuclear proliferation.
The challenge, this expert says, is actually enforcing it at sea.
Mr. Trump needs to look well beyond those at the top of the government in Beijing and to really start looking more into how shady international commerce, shell companies, and maritime traffic is.
In this case, the oil tanker was supposedly Chinese-owned, managed out of Norway, and chartered by a company in Taiwan. A possible breach of the sanctions by China could threaten its trading relationship with the U.S. In an interview with the New York Times, Trump said, "I have been soft on China because the only thing more important to me than trade is war."
Trump made the decision early on that because of the North Korean threat, he wasn't going to impose some of the harsh measures like high tariffs against China that he had threatened to do during the campaign as long as Beijing cooperated with us.
If the alleged oil transfer is a sign that Beijing isn't cooperating, Trump's tough talk on trade could finally be put into action. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Washington.
Now, it's not just China accused of helping the Pyongyang regime. Reuters reporting tonight that Russian tankers have also supplied fuel to North Korea. Those too would go against strict rules imposed by the international community.
Pyongyang has chosen the path of isolation.
It was a week ago today the UN Security Council slapped new sanctions on the regime, specifically banning ships from illegally providing oil to North Korea.
Today's resolution achieves an 89% total reduction of the Kim regime's ability to import gasoline, diesel, and other refined products.
And it's not just imports.
We've also banned North Korean exports of food products, machinery, and industrial and electrical equipment.
All meant to choke off cash flowing into its nuclear weapons program.
Starting next week, it's going to be a lot harder to get a new mortgage. The government wants to make sure that you can actually afford a rate hike. For the first time, these rules will apply to people with a down payment of 20% or more. Here's an example. Say your bank offers 2.9%. You'll have to prove you could absorb a rate hike of 2 percentage points. Or the 5-year average rate posted by the Bank of Canada, whichever is higher. Right now, it would be the bank's 4.99%. Here's the impact on a household earning, say, about $100,000. Right now, you could qualify for a mortgage of about $550,000. Going forward, your mortgage would be limited to just under $459,000. It's bound to have an impact on the housing market. We asked Aaron Saltzman to size it up.
In the Toronto real estate market, this house was right at the sweet spot. Renovated but modest, semi-detached, listed at just under $1 million. It sold in 5 days for $300,000 over asking. It was featured as Sale of the Week in Toronto Life magazine. Among those who lost out in the bidding war were Jenny Gilbert and Grant Channer.
We've literally been looking for a year, and we have put in offers on seven houses. Lost every single one of them, even though we've gone way over the price.
Asking price.
They hope that will change with new mortgage rules about to come into effect across Canada.
We may have less competition out there.
Less competition perhaps because the federal government will now require all borrowers to pass a mortgage stress test. Starting January 1st, even those with at least a 20% down payment or more will have to prove they can pay a mortgage at a higher rate than what they qualify for.
The Bank of Canada and the Government of Canada definitely have concerns that consumer borrowing continues to increase.
Record consumer debt levels could leave people overextended if interest rates rise and put the economy at risk. Ottawa had already toughened the stress test for variable mortgages and buyers with smaller down payments. Agents say this latest change will hit buyers looking to upgrade and those in higher price brackets.
You go to $1 million, much smaller, and then once you're beyond $1 million, then it's very few.
And these rules will make that market even smaller.
Yes, for sure.
Jenny Gilbert and Grant Channer are counting on it. They hope tougher mortgage rules could put a home like this out of reach for some buyers. And maybe they'll be the proud owners of the next sale of the week. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead on The National. Last night we told you about a scary bus ride on Canada's busiest highway. The driver suddenly passed out with dozens on board. Well, tonight you're going to hear from the woman who jumped into action to steer them all to safety.
And as Jan Arden is appointed to the Order of Canada, we'll revisit a conversation she had earlier with Adrian about caring for her mother, who has Alzheimer's.
But first, Yellowknife's first sledge hockey team ever. The thing is, most of those kids don't need the sledge.
What does that say about all your friends who did this?
They're really good friends. They do a lot of things just so I can do it with them.
Really, we're just trying to help them and make it really fun for all of us.
Let's talk about the harassment allegations, very serious allegations, particularly in the climate in which all of us live right now. Yours and the Liberal Party's decision to expel Massimo Pichetti, Scott Andrews, from caucus, based on allegations of sexual harassment, allegations. Was that too heavy-handed an approach for that time?
Absolutely not. It's 2014 when a leader receives direct allegations, direct stories like I heard. I had an obligation to act, and I suspended those MPs from the Liberal Party, and I triggered a process in the House of Commons and a third-party process that will give them a chance to give people a chance to go through that process.
Turn the lens a bit this way. CBC, as a corporation, funding has been an issue. And you know, to be fair, CBC has been dealing with a number of different challenges, internal and external. I mean, the loss of hockey is a big factor for CBC. There's also the funding cuts that we've seen from the current government. What do you think about those cuts? Do you think they're warranted?
No, I think CBC has a very important mandate to bind Canada together in both official languages, tell local stories, and make sure that we have a sense of our strength, our culture, our stories. I would reverse the process that has been taken in place that is cutting. I mean, there's still some big questions about CBC as how it should function in a multi-channel universe, what kinds of innovations are going to be needed to keep it relevant and fulfilling its mandate in the best possible way.
You're an old hand at this whole parenting thing. You're a veteran. So what advice? What can you give me? What's the secret?
The real advice is, focus on giving them as much love and attention as you can. Don't get distracted by your BlackBerry. Don't get distracted.
On The National tonight, word from the Governor General's office that pharmaceutical magnate Barry Sherman will be appointed to the Order of Canada. The list of recipients was just released today, 2 weeks after Sherman and his wife were found dead in their Toronto home under what police call suspicious circumstances. A family member or friend will be invited to accept the award in Barry Sherman's name. The retail store Claire's is fighting back against a report that asbestos was found in some of their makeup products. The company says their initial testing showed no sign of asbestos in their cosmetics, but they also say out of an abundance of caution, they'll test some more. Claire's stopped sales of some products this week, including some in Canada, after an American family said they tested the store's makeup and found asbestos.
Excellent release. Has never scored in a shootout in the Quebec League. Works in, missed it, and the United States has won it.
And a nail-biting finish on a positively bone-chilling day at the World Junior Championships in New York State. Team Canada fell to the Americans in a shootout, losing 4-3 in the preliminary round. Fun fact, this was the first ever outdoor game at the World Juniors, and despite the frigid cold, more than 44,000 fans came out to watch.
Like thousands, if not millions of kids in this country, Riley Oldford loves to play hockey. He just needs a certain kind of team and a certain bunch of pals. In Yellowknife, he's got both of them. David Common explains.
Yellowknife in the winter requires a special kind of stamina. You can get a lot colder than this, making the arena one of the warmer places to gather, especially these days. Yellowknife's first ever sledge hockey team, just like the Paralympians. Thing is, almost none of these kids need a sledge.
Okay, now put your feet back on.
They have no disability.
No better? Yeah. Ready?
But they're doing it because of a boy who does.
You almost got it over the red line. Oh, you got it over the red line.
Riley Oldford lives and breathes hockey. Even off the ice, he has no trouble handling a puck.
Oh, no.
One time.
Hey, what?
Just.
And he has no problem defeating his elders either.
Come on. Yeah, right here. I'm open.
Oh. There have been many challenges, though, related to his cerebral palsy, beginning on day one. Riley was a code blue delivery, born nearly 2 months premature. At just under 4 pounds, he was put in intensive care. So sick, so tiny, his parents were barely allowed to touch him. You got a kid here who many people, many doctors didn't think would live.
Yep. He defied the odds. He was christened on the day that he was born. The doctors came to us and said that he wouldn't make it through that day.
That's a tough thing to hear.
It is a tough thing to hear.
So when you think about this guy sitting here now, and this game you're going to play, and all these friends who are joining him, that's a pretty big journey.
It is. For him to be able to play hockey and to be able to do that in Yellowknife with his peers and with people that he's met through hockey and through school is amazing.
So this is your room.
Yeah.
Cool.
There we go. So there's a Derek Whitson stick.
That's this?
Yeah, that one. And
Okay.
that was from 2011.
Okay, and who's he? Who's Derek?
So he used to play on Team Canada
Yeah.
for sledge hockey.
So he's pretty good.
Yeah.
Riley is now 12 years old, but his situation has meant growing up faster in some ways. Yeah.
Oh
And he's pretty frank about it. And your number?
Yeah.
68. Did you choose 68?
Yeah. So when I was born,
Yeah.
I had 68 days on a ventilator. So it helps you breathe.
Yeah.
Pumps
Like a
air
life
in.
support.
Yeah, life support. Pumps air in, takes it out. Pumps air in, takes it out. So
It's a big subject. Sometimes you forget Riley is just a kid. A pretty popular kid, as it turns out. When you started playing, you were the only kid.
yeah,
And then a bunch of your friends said,
I want to try it.
and when I think about what's happened with you and your friends, it's that your friends said, if stand-up hockey is not accessible to you,
Then
that
we'll
they're
just
going to
do
be...
sledge hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they like it.
What does that say about all your friends who did this?
They're really good friends. They do a lot of things just so I can do it with them.
We caught up with those friends. About 22 of them now play on sledges.
It's good to get on the ice a bit more often, and it's good workout for the arms.
Yeah. Liam Leonard was one of the first.
When you look at a kid like Riley, like, you know, the way you walk into the building and the way he walks into the building is different. But by you and a lot of your friends getting together,
Yep.
you're taking a lot of that difference away.
Yep. It's really, we're just trying to help him and make it really fun for all of us. And he's done a great job at making it fun for us too.
Much of that work is thanks to Riley's mom. She is herself one of the players. About 10 are on the ice at any one time, and Riley, when that puck is up for grabs, well, he races for it.
Out on the ice, he doesn't need anybody to help him.
No, I think this is where he probably enjoys himself most.
It's not that hockey erases the challenges in his life, but it's an important reminder that his life is about much more than those challenges. Riley's friends insist he should be thanked for introducing them to sledge hockey. He's pretty quick to thank them, too.
Awesome.
What's so awesome about it?
Just they could do so many other sports. They could be at home. They could not even care.
Yeah.
And they come out and they love it.
1, 2, 3, sled!
David Common, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Hey, Riley, we think you and your friends are pretty awesome. When we come back, Jen Arden opens up about a sad reality that thousands of Canadians are facing. Her mother will soon forget who she is because she has Alzheimer's. Her frank and honest conversation with Adrienne Arsenault is next.
I was so scared and so angry that it just came across as this, I was an asshole to my mom.
I would like to have some of the attributes of computers. For example, perfect recall, not forgetting to go to certain meetings, and what are people's names and things like that.
Sean Morgan is a software consultant from Calgary. He says he wouldn't be first in line for, say, computerized eyeballs, but he'd be right up there. Sean says that in the next 10 or 20 years, we'll all be able to get implants to improve our memories, our endurance, and brain power. We'll not only be more powerful, we'll be more efficient.
I see a gradual evolution as our electronic appliances, our personal computers, digital organizers, cellular telephones, wristwatches, as they become smaller, that we'll end up being wearing more and more electronics. At some point, as they become smaller, it'll be just more convenient to have them implanted, like the chips that are available now for dogs, where you can implant an identifier for the dog. If that was the identifier for an individual, you could go up to the bank and wave your hand over the sensor for this chip and not have to type in your PIN number.
It would also mean that anybody could find me. They could track me like a dog.
Exactly. So that's why these are important issues to discuss. And what do we do about protecting this information? What information are we actually giving out to people?
Are we getting there?
Our machines are beginning to look more like organisms. And our organisms, as our understanding of them improves, are beginning to look more like machines. So regardless of research directly into things like plugging computers into your brain, the trends are in that direction.
But why open Pandora's box?
It's already open. It's too late to put all the demons back in.
But Arthur Croker thinks it's the demons we already have that are driving this desire for wired flesh.
We're really speaking about the consequences, the ethical consequences and moral consequences of a split culture and split bodies. We're talking about a culture of profound cynicism.
But just to play devil's advocate here, the phone was a wonderful invention. The next step now, it seems, in the phone is to have one implanted in your head. Why not? Why not have a cell phone in your head? It could be an improvement.
Yeah, why not? Who needs a head after all? Why not have 4 heads and 4 telephones? These are completely bubble-headed fantasies that can only come out of a culture that prides itself on reinventing the self continuously. You know, really a culture from beginning to end is deeply nihilistic in character and has all the enthusiasm and madcap kind of happiness about that, but also deep loneliness and deep sadness.
I enjoy being a human very much, and I enjoy being alive. I would like to live so long because I cherish the experience of being here.
Randall Kuhn loves life so much he wants to live forever. He's a doctoral student in psychology at Montreal's McGill University. When his body gets old, he wants to move his mind into a computer. The only downside is that right now, to scan his brain, he'd have to carve it up. But someday, he thinks scientists just might figure out a way to make it happen. It's called mind uploading.
Uploading is not sucking the essence out of my brain, it's replicating my brain.
It's a replication of the brain and all that essence.
So why do it if you're going to die?
Well, in that case, you wouldn't die because your copy would be in the computer and it would be alive.
But then I have no more flesh, I have no body.
Exactly. So then you would have to need a replacement body, and that body could be a robot, or it could be some kind of biological body that was generated in some way that we don't know yet. Or it could just be that you live in a virtual world that was basically programmed around you inside the computer.
But is that me? Is that entirely me in my brain? Can you remake me just with my brain? Is that my feelings, my soul, everything?
That's part of the first concept you have to agree with if you agree with mind uploading. You have to feel that everything we perceive of resides in what we call the brain.
You do your best and hope like hell.
Janne Arden is among this country's most celebrated artists. Today, she was granted one of the highest civilian honors, the Order of Canada, for her achievements as a singer, songwriter, broadcaster, and for her charity work. Arden's big heart is no secret to her loyal fans, but these days she's opening up like never before about caring for parents with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's a story that's hitting home for more and more Canadians. So tonight, here again, is Adrian's conversation about acceptance and love.
The stats don't lie. The number of Canadians living with dementia or Alzheimer's is growing. As of 2016, there are more than 500,000 Canadians living with the disease. In 15 years, that number is expected to rise to almost 1 million and cost Canada's healthcare system over $16 billion a year. It will also obviously impact a lot of lives, including Janne Arden's. You probably know her for her music.
I've got a good mother.
And for that wicked, self-deprecating wit.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. You got hooters like this that get in the way of everything. Everything.
Hey, really nice to meet you. Really nice. But these days, we're seeing a new side of Janne Arden, one she kept private for a long time. The world within a life caring for her aging parents who'd been married for nearly 60 years. Her father had dementia, among other things, and died in 2015. Her mother has Alzheimer's and is declining. Living with that and them is the basis of her new book, Feeding My Mother. It's recipes, remembrances, pictures of the literally lonely road and the little joys. I met up with Janne Arden to talk over tea at the Drake Hotel in Toronto.
What was the first moment you realized that something was happening with your mom?
My sister-in-law had been over. My brother and her had a cat, and the cat passed away. And she's like, for heaven's sakes, the cat died yesterday. Don't say anything to him about the cat dying. She must have said it to us 10 times. My mom said, we would never say anything about the cat dying. I'm like, no, it's cool. You tell him. Phone rang. 30 seconds later, it is my brother on the phone, just saying hello to my mom. First thing she said, well, your cat died. And I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I thought, this just isn't forgetting where your car is parked. This just isn't forgetting how to set the clock radio or little banal things that happen in a day-to-day life. This is, something's wrong. And I ignored it for probably another 2.5 years. I just chalked it up to garden variety memory loss, although I knew it was much more horrible.
So your mom starts losing her memory, and nobody really talks about it.
Nope.
But then your dad's sick too.
Yep, dementia. But he had a different kind of dementia. He had more physical problems. My mom was his caretaker. And I can't explain what happens within the construct of how a person operates, but my mom's operation manual told her to look after my dad and to do these tasks, which she was very capable of doing. But I also knew it was making her worse.
Was your mom aware of your dad's decline?
They were so hilarious, Adrian, the two of them. Like, well, he's completely insane. He can't do anything. And I'm thinking, you are a close second. Let me tell you what, the two of you.
Is that why you started to write it down? Because you thought, how am I ever going to convey this?
I was actually really scared. And I remember typing, sitting on my couch, and I'd always kind of written journals. I guess they call them blogs now. And I'd always kind of written journals, but I'd never written about my folks, because I, of course, am in denial completely about any of this happening, that they're going to get better. And I wrote it down, just that the stuff was going on. I can't even remember the first entry, but I know my office called me the next day and they said, have you noticed what's going on with your Facebook page? Basically, 1 million people have seen your entry. And I just was shocked. And along with that, we had 4,000 comments. And it hit me for the first time. I bawled my head off trying to read through them because it made my problem seem so insignificant.
Is that the first time you felt a little less lonely?
Yes. I don't know why there's so much shame involved with memory loss and with Alzheimer's.
But what is the shame part? What is there to be ashamed of in terms of memory loss?
It's shameful. Like when I stood in the room with Mom and I'd hear her just off to the side repeating a story for like the 10th time. And I had a friend going, it's okay, don't worry about it. And I was ashamed. I'd be like, oh my God, she's on the 10th time, because I was so scared and so angry that it just came across as this, I was an asshole to my mom quite a lot of the time. When this started happening, very brief with her. I was the memory police. I'd correct her. I'm still very much in denial. We haven't had the official diagnosis of Alzheimer's at this point. So I'm fighting it. I'm correcting her. If she saw, oh, there's people with orange hats in your yard, I'd be like, where? Where are they? And I'm so scared, but I felt myself go into this person that I hate so much. Thank God she's gone now, but I would take Mom and I'd say, let's go. Let's walk across the yard and let's go see where these people are. That's what I actually did. She was defiant. She still is to this day. Jan, I know you can't see them, but I can, and they're right there.
Did it ever hurt her though?
There was lots of tears. There was lots of stuff of her and I standing in the driveway. It lasted for probably 18 months, 20 months, especially when I had people come and start helping. I'd say, Mom, you can't be alone here. When I'm working, you can't be alone. And when they started coming 2.5 years ago, there was those goddamn homeless women, and they're doing all their goddamn laundry in the house. This is my mom who never swore in her life.
She thought homeless women had moved into the house.
And it was very volatile. There's a lot of crying on my part by myself, because she'd say, I hope you get this. You're the worst person. You're the worst daughter. And it was so hard. I just said, Mom, I'm doing what you would probably do for me. I would never do this to you. I would never have people in your home. And I was so trapped. I had, friends that would say, you should start looking at places. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna just give up. I don't even know what I'm doing yet.
I want to ask you about your dad, and I am sorry. It's wrenching to read about him dying. What was that day like for you inside your head?
He had rallied many times. I thought he'll come around. And my little brother's like, no, I don't think so this time. I mean, he was unconscious. They were giving him morphine, but it was the most god-awful thing I've ever seen. My mother, sitting in the corner, said, would it kill them to give him a lozenge? She had no idea. Alzheimer's is a gift in that department. Tempers sentiment somehow. She wasn't crying or anything.
So the Alzheimer's sort of smoothed the edges of her grief.
My mom is not sentimental anymore. My old mother would have been so besieged with grief, I think it would have killed her. But this version of my mom, she said, well, he sure put a damper on my birthday. She knew it was her birthday.
You asked her at one point if she thought she'd forget you.
She said, my mind might, but my heart won't. It was a very hard thing to hear. She will forget me at some point. She still knows who I am now. Oh, it's you. It's the weirdest things that go. She phoned me one day and she goes, you have to come over here and show me how to use this phone. I said, well, you're on the phone right now. I'm not. I said, you are on the phone. Well, for God's sakes. I'm like, that's pretty good, Mom. I'm sure one of the care workers helped her. She says, well, how do I hang it up? I said, follow that cord down to the click. She hung it up.
Are you scared for your own health?
Yeah, crosses my mind. But we all have our roads to walk, but chances are pretty good that I could very well have memory loss. It is something that's pretty prevalent these days. But hopefully I'll do it with some grace and style like my mom does.
I know there is this hunger that people want to hear what you have to say because I think they need to hear that they're not alone. What would you tell them about what to be careful of?
The day the tides turn for me, it's a relatively simple thing. My mom had once again pointed out to me that there was people on my deck, always with the orange hats. I felt this part of my spine, you know, go up. Oh, here we go again. And I just went, oh, well, you'd think they could pick up a broom. And it was the nicest thing, because she said, well, you'd think they could. And we were done. We were just off onto something else. I go where my mom goes now. Alzheimer's, you better not deal with the future. You just have to deal with the day, because there is no future. You cannot plan. You cannot live like that. You have to be where you are. End of story.
Good spot to end. Jan Arden, thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
I appreciate it.
Arden posted an update about her mom on Facebook this morning. She said, in part, a darling friend of mine told me to read to her. You need to read your mom your book. Reading is one of the most beautiful things you can do for another person. You really need to do that for you and for her. Arden went on, I think I'll try and do that today. I'll just keep trying.
Okay, we have more still to come, but first, all week, we've been telling you the stories behind some of our favorite images of the year. And behind the lens tonight, Samuel Martin, a video producer in Edmonton. He got creative on a story about graffiti artists in that city.
When an image can tell a story in a frame, I think that connects with people. The cliche of pictures worth 1,000 words can be very true. I chose this because I wanted to showcase something a little bit more lighthearted.
This is just something to uplift spirits and, you know, really bring happiness.
So it wasn't just local people spray painting city walls in Edmonton. They brought in international artists to help create beautiful art around the city everyone can enjoy. When I first thought of the assignment and how I was going to do it, I was just thinking of all the fun things I could do. When I came up with the idea to bring the window pane out and get them to spray it, they were all game. You could shoot stuff on a really high shutter, so you could see the spray kind of going through. Playing with new toys, like doing a little bit of time lapses here and there with a GoPro and whatnot. It really kind of expands your mind of the opportunities you could do to help tell stories like this. This is art. That was my goal in kind of telling this story. A lot of people are saying that's cool. Like, that's a really cool story, or that's really cool, like, seeing those kind of shots and getting to talk to these artists and getting their perspective.
A mango is a mango is a mango, right? Well, not quite. These mangoes have been zapped. They've been irradiated with a dose roughly equivalent to 10,000 chest x-rays.
Good. Approved by the FDA, the USDA, nice. The EPA.
Delicious.
This peculiar taste test took place in Miami Beach 2 months ago. Lorenzo's became the first place in North America ever to sell irradiated fruit. And there's a chance irradiation may come to Canada. Instead of mangoes, we may end up eating zapped chicken. The irradiation of food may become one of the hottest health issues of the 1980s.
Here is the first really new method of food preservation.
You want to get nuked? Sure, go for it, and let's build a silo in my backyard.
Oh, I have eaten irradiated food, and I certainly would actively look for it if it was in the supermarket.
This is cobalt-60, a byproduct of Canada's nuclear reactors, and the most common power source of food irradiation. This is how it works. Chicken, for example, goes into the irradiator on large pallets. Inside, the cobalt-60 rods are raised from a pool of water. The chicken revolves around the radioactive source. The rods are returned to the water, and the irradiated chicken moves outside. The government is now considering allowing the irradiation of poultry for 2 reasons. Firstly, to cut down salmonella poisoning. Most cases of salmonella poisoning in Canada involve poultry. Secondly, to extend shelf life. For 40 years, scientists have studied food irradiation, and most have declared it safe. They point to the astronauts who munch their way to the moon on zapped steak. They say it's safer, cheaper, and more effective than chemical sprays and fumigants. Sprays and fumigants that in some cases have been outlawed.
We're looking in agriculture for non-chemical means of protecting the crops or the animals.
Dr. Norm Tape of Agriculture Canada has just been made chairman of a UN group of all 26 nations that currently irradiate food.
Irradiation isn't going to be a panacea. It's not going to be our milk supply or breads and our meats and our fish and all that. I think there are going to be selected applications where there are health benefits and it's economically feasible.
The people that work here at Atomic Energy of Canada Limited have asked the government for approval to irradiate poultry. They're waiting for the government's decision with great interest. Most of the 140 irradiators now in use around the world have been produced right here. In the majority of cases, they're used to sterilize medical and hospital disposable goods like surgeon's gloves or cotton swabs. It's a multi-million-dollar business, a growth sector in a nuclear industry that has been slumping badly. If the government gives the green light for food irradiation, AECL could be the big winner.
Well, we're talking many millions of dollars of business a year, well downstream.
Bruce Wilson is AECL's director of marketing. He's sold irradiators around the world from China to South Africa, $15 million worth over the last year alone.
Given that you have a regulation in place, you have the world's biggest and best supplier of this technology in your own backyard.
I think it's safe to say that in all the years we've covered refugee crises, I've never seen anything quite like this.
As a foreign correspondent, Nella Ayed has seen a lot of human misery up close, but it's hard to comprehend exactly how the Rohingya migrant crisis could surpass so many others. Last week, Canadian envoy Bob Rae said words can barely express the scale of this catastrophe. And in tonight's Reporter's Notebook, you'll get a powerful impression of what Nalla saw in Bangladesh and the tales of horror she heard. A warning, some of it is hard to hear.
This is where you end up for treatment when you have nothing. Battle wounds notwithstanding, beds aren't always included. At the Rohingya unit of the district Sadar Hospital, survivors share the trauma and the hallway.
So this one woman had shrapnel wounds in her leg, and she had a tiny little baby, this little child with her, on the cold stone floor on just a white sheet, no attention, just a foot wrapped up in gauze and in the open hallway. I've never seen anything like that anywhere. When people start to say that hundreds of thousands of people are on the move in this day and age, in the modern day world, because of violence and crossing a border, it really catches your attention. But unless you go there, until you actually step foot into some of those refugee camps and go next to the border there, I don't think you really have a good idea of what's going on.
Anguish is a heavy load carried across borders. On the final leg of an epic escape, they come with it in the thousands.
At one point, Richard Deavy, our cameraman, was filming as the column was walking by, and this man stopped. I guess he could tell what we were doing, and he just looked at Richard and started talking.
Dean Muhammad says they were firing in my area and even called us out from our home and then slit my father's throat.
And when he was done telling his story, he walked away.
Just off the edge of Bangladesh, it would have been impossible to look away. A front row view to the horrors of the past month. An island full of witnesses now stranded in no man's land.
There was about 1,300 people in this tiny little patch of land, and I thought this was the most remarkable part of the story, is that it was sad enough to watch all these people walking for days to get to safety in Bangladesh. Here are these people who tried to do that and ended up in a spot where they couldn't move. So they were living in difficult conditions, very cramped, lots of tents, lots of kids, and they were cut off from both countries. Suddenly, I saw from afar, this large group of women together, kind of gliding through the water and coming over and sitting under kind of a little canopy, where our producer, Stephanie Genzer, actually had the first chance to go talk to them. The look on our producer's face kind of gave me a preview of what I was about to hear, or gave me a sense that these were not going to be ordinary conversations.
Nur Asha lives there in a tent with the demons of the day she had both her home and her dignity taken away.
She was very stoic, as she described how she got sort of stuck in her home while everybody else had fled, and how a number of men in uniform accosted her and one by one had taken turns raping her. But before we got to that, before I actually heard the details, our producer was translating, and at one point he couldn't speak anymore because he started to cry.
She says they were military and that it's destroyed her. There's pain in my back, pain in my belly, and when I cough, blood comes out, she says.
I didn't know how to conclude that interview. What kinds of questions do you ask when you hear a story like that? Those are the things that were going through my mind. What is a follow-up, an appropriate follow-up question when someone tells you they've been raped repeatedly by soldiers? I couldn't really come up with a question. I kind of let her talk. But I remember that I didn't know how to walk away from her. It was one of the toughest interviews I've ever had to do, I think.
It's here the border guards introduced us to Anjuara Begum. Of her 4 children, only 1 remains. 2 are missing. The other, she says, thrown into a fire by Burmese soldiers right in front of her. They snatched my 3-month-old baby and turned him to ash, she says.
We only go to places to cover some of the most difficult situations that people go through. So we hear some pretty awful things. But this one has to be one of the most difficult stories I have ever heard, and one of the most shocking I've ever heard. How do you ever get over the fact that you watched your youngest burn in a fire? I just can't imagine that. And those are the thoughts that go through your mind when you're doing this interview. Never mind the fact that you can't ask questions after that. What do you say?
In the hundreds of thousands, they have made their case. And so now they wait. Nala Ayed, CBC News at the Bangladesh-Myanmar border.
There are now reports out of Bangladesh that the government is negotiating the return of some Rohingya migrants to Myanmar, as many as 100,000 in the first phase. A list has been prepared for Myanmar to consider, but we're unable to verify if that country's leaders are in fact receptive.
Up next, the woman who steered a bus to safety when the driver suddenly passed out at the wheel. Remember, you can get the real story, the full story from The National all day long. Find powerful images on Instagram, exclusive video on Facebook, and of course, tweet us at CBC The National.
The Calgary Police Test Track in southeast Calgary. This is where police recruits learn the art of pursuit driving, and where reporters like me get to find out what impaired driving means. I did some drinking and some driving under the supervision of the Calgary Police. The test worked like this. First, I drove the skill test track cold sober.
Now, on the line, I want my left wheels on this yellow line.
Yeah, both left wheels at the same time.
Okay. And now my right wheels have to go over this yellow dot here. The right front or the right rear?
Okay, hope I hit it. And now through this narrow-looking gate here. Then I did the whole thing in reverse gear. To qualify, a police recruit must drive the course in less than 2 minutes and 15 seconds, with no more than 3 errors. Okay.
Yeah, that is a qualifying time.
Is it?
Yep.
Terrific. Then it was inside for a few drinks. The amount was calculated on my height and body weight. I drank Crown Royal Rye, good stuff, with ice, no mix, and I had something to eat. Constable Dave Ingeberg ran the test and played bartender.
Okay, drink up, Bob, because we've got to give you one more, and then that's it.
After the drinking session, I took the standard police breathalyzer test.
Okay, Bob, your result is 120 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood. The legal limit being 80 milligrams of alcohol. You're 40 milligrams over this time.
Okay, I've had 10 ounces of Crown Royal and a couple of sandwiches in the last hour and a half, 2 hours. I feel fine. In fact, I'm confident that I'll do even better than I did dead sober, and I'm not holding up the car.
Go.
There we go. The narrow gate. Looks like a pretty good approach here, if I do say so myself. Here we go with the wheels over the little yellow dot. As usual, the wrong wheels.
That was after the 10 ounces.
After 10 ounces. Oh, hit one. Okay, well, make the best we can of it. Okay.
On the National tonight, a serious collision in southern Ontario has left one person dead and 2 others in critical condition. It happened in Caledon, about a 45-minute drive northwest of downtown Toronto. Police say the crash involved a car and a pickup truck. In all, 7 people were sent to hospital. ISIS is claiming responsibility for a deadly attack targeting Coptic Christians in Egypt. Officials say a gunman on a motorcycle killed 2 people at a store before opening fire outside a Coptic church. At least 9 people were killed in that attack. Officials say the gunman was also killed. And the Pentagon confirmed tonight that transgender people will be allowed to enlist in the U.S. military as of Monday. President Trump tried to stop that from happening, but his administration was defeated in court several times. The Justice Department said it won't challenge those rulings before the new year, but that it would still continue to defend Trump's transgender ban in courts.
Well, there was a bit of a commotion at the front of the bus, and a number of people stood up. A bunch of people turned around and someone yelled, "Can anyone drive a bus?"
We first told you about that frightening incident last night. There were dozens of people on board a bus driving on the 401 in Toronto when the driver just suddenly passed out at the wheel. The driver was having a medical episode, and that's when a quick-thinking passenger jumped up and grabbed the wheel. Her name is Rebecca Powley. We tracked her down tonight. It turns out that this was actually her first time on a bus in 25 years, and her experience is our moment of the day.
The bus was definitely still going, so I went up and took his foot off the gas and steered the bus onto the right-hand shoulder out of the traffic. I had to put my hand on the brake because he was in the seat, and I felt like I was in a weird dream. Yeah. And then we just got off at the stop and, carried on with our day. We all have to stick together when we get into situations like this, and sometimes the person beside you that's a stranger might not be a stranger at the end of the day.
And Andrew, she had her 11-year-old kid with her, so she said, well, if no one's going to do this, I'm going to do it because I got my kid here.
Well, and get this, so reportedly she's been offered a lifetime of free rides, rather, on this company's buses. I don't know if she'll get on a bus after the way this one ended, but there you go.
We'll see. That's the National for December 29th. Good night.
Good night.